Hi everyone, I'm the Book Guy, and today we're discussing Dr. Philip Chase and his new book, While Darkness Gathers, a sequel to the Edan trilogy. Now, if you're just unfamiliar with all of those terms, Philip Chase is a YouTuber and medievalist with a PhD in English literature, and he wrote the Edan trilogy, which is one of the most richly detailed and well-realized fictional worlds I have ever seen. The Edan trilogy was released back in 2023, and if you want to know more about that trilogy, I've done a review on it already, which I'll link in the description below. Philip himself said that that video was the most detailed review of his series, which is a very polite way of saying it was long and it just went on and on. But now he has written a sequel novel, While Darkness Gathers, set 16 years later in the same world. This book is a great follow-up to the main series, but it's also quite different. It's a standalone adventure, so it's not setting up the next trilogy. It's much shorter at 336 pages, and it's less dark and more adventurous. In fact, if the Edan trilogy is frequently compared to The Lord of the Rings, then I would compare While Darkness Gathers to The Hobbit, but if The Hobbit came after. One important note, this book really should be read after the main series in my opinion. The story does stand alone and it doesn't require external context to work, but it does inevitably spoil most of the main beats of the original trilogy. With that in mind, let's look at this novel, spoiler-free of course, and see if it's going to be something that you might like to read. The greatest dragon that the world has ever known has awakened from its slumber and is now burning the entire northern realm. King Dragonbane has slain a dragon before. Now he is his people's last hope to save them from fiery destruction. Yet this mighty hero has aged 16 years, and today's dragon is far stronger than the one he faced long ago. At the same time, warriors from the Wildlands are taking advantage of the situation to invade the northern realm. Now Dragonbane finds himself surrounded on all sides. At the magic school of Astralad in the far south, a young girl called Rial is impressing all of her teachers with her magical ability, yet Rial wants to take on the dragon. She might just have the rare power level great enough to challenge the mighty beast, but when her teachers refuse naturally to let this child try, Rial sneaks out of home with a small group of friends and begins a bold quest across the world to stop this great monster. However, the sorceress Sequara cannot allow this. Sequara chases after Rial to try to stop her, because Rial's power might be far greater than she realizes, and unleashing it could mean a danger even greater than the mighty dragon. Before we discuss the dragon, we have to discuss the elephant in the room. I love short books, and they take a ton of skill to write, but in my experience, I find people are much harsher when they judge short books. Are you just saying that because you wrote a short book?
Shut up! Get out!
Philip has openly said that this book was a challenge he set for himself to write a short book. Now, many people will assume that since the Edan trilogy was 3 large epic books, that one short book would be comparatively easy. But that's not true. It requires a very different skill set.
A very particular set of skills.
Short books, when they're done right, still have a 3-act structure. There's character arcs, big action scenes, and plot twists, but all in a much more condensed, concentrated dosage. It's easy to write a character arc if you have 1,000 pages to do it, but doing the same thing in 300 pages can be a lot harder to do realistically. The writing has to be tighter. The writer has to make every word count, and books that are short are often edited within an inch of their lives. So I think it's a shame when people consider short books to be anticlimactic. It's like people saying that they don't like the Mona Lisa because it's small, when it's still the Mona Lisa. And there's plenty of other things to hate about it. Anyway, I personally found this book to be an excellent example of concentrated writing. There's still multiple plot lines being juggled, there's multiple protagonists, and even multiple character arcs that are very well executed. And that's even more impressive because it was done so efficiently. So there are 4 point-of-view characters, each with their respective plot lines and character journeys, which is really impressive for 336 pages in total. Rial is our youngest protagonist with untested powers, going on an adventure with her 2 friends. This is a surprisingly light-hearted plotline, considering how dark Edan could be at times. But this plotline is fun and even humorous. But I also like that it has a risk factor. You see, a lot of plotlines that have young adult protagonists, whether they're in the young adult genre or not, focus on young adults testing their abilities for the first time. And it almost always works out for them immediately, which isn't entirely realistic. I mean, how many of you started acting like an adult and immediately knew what you're doing? I still don't know what I'm doing. But here, our young adults make mistakes. Rial's magic is incredibly risky, so this plotline doesn't have plot armor just because the protagonists are young. I would call the story empowering while still showing the risks. It's a very mature balance. Moving on, Sequara is our returning protagonist from the first series, and I know, which is itself a spoiler, but I'm not saying anything about her current life. Let's just say she's been teaching magic and Rial is her best student. But when Rial leaves, Sequara goes on the journey to find and rescue her. Now, Sequara has always been one of the most well-realized characters in the first trilogy, and this book is no exception. Here, she's struggling with the burdens of being a war veteran. She's haunted by the actions she took in the war, however necessary they were. She's struggling with grief, regret, and PTSD. In many ways, she is searching for peace and redemption. This type of character arc can be hard to do because the character can easily be seen as just someone who complains a lot, or they can be sad all the time and become a one-note character. Instead of gaining the reader's sympathy, they can become annoying. But this arc was handled very well. I think it works because Sequara is fighting back against her inner demons. There is tension in the uncertainty. We don't know if she will rise above her depression or fall deeper into it. Plus, she moves through her grief and tries to process it, so the plotline feels like it's progressing, not stagnating. Our next character is Dragonbane, and now this is also a returning character from Trilogy 1, but I'm not using his real name. I'm calling him Dragonbane because I don't want you to figure out which character becomes a dragon slayer. That's a spoiler. So Dragonbane used to be a mighty warrior, but after 16 years of sitting on a throne, he may have lost some of his former strength. While Dragonbane may be externally fighting a dragon and the invading wildmen, internally, this is a story of a great warrior struggling with aging. Has he already peaked in life? Will he never again achieve anything noteworthy? More importantly, can he still protect his people as a leader if he cannot win this fight? This plot reminded me of the Realm of the Elderlings and the final Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which is a high compliment, by the way. In the same way that Fitz is accepting his age and limitations, but also raging against them, Dragonbane is very much testing his abilities and limitations and once more pushing against them. Our final plotline is the smallest of the 4. Sigra is a captive of the Wildmen, so she has to play the part of a docile captive even as she plans her escape. Sigra is largely our point of view character for the Wildman invasion and is setting up the growing risk of human conflict. But she's going to discover that this is not exactly a good versus evil situation. I will say, while I think all of these 4 plotlines achieved their goals in a very short amount of time, this one plotline with Sigra as a captive is the only one that I think might have needed just a little more time. Her character arc is just slightly too abrupt. Just to be clear, that is literally the only criticism I have today. Sequels need to add something. If a sequel is just a standalone story with no wider consequences, it can feel anticlimactic. Like Jurassic Park 3. Sorry, I've been binging the Jurassic movies, so that's gonna come up again. The third movie is a functional story, but it has very little connection to the ones before and has changed nothing really by the end of it. Sequels need to advance the wider story in some way, even just a small way, or they can feel pointless. Well, this sequel advances a few things, but the 2 biggest, in my opinion, were the passage of time and the magic. We see this world has changed a lot since the first trilogy. Societies have shifted, religions have changed their role in how they influence influence countries, and the geopolitical relationship between kingdoms has changed too. So it doesn't feel like the exact same world we just left. It's grown in new and interesting ways. Also, the magic has changed too. By the end of the trilogy, we've had revelations about magic. Now we can play around with that revelation. Now that's all I can say, unfortunately, but this magic system was stronger than ever and used to its full potential. It's a sign of a good sequel. Speaking of. Writing a sequel is its own art form with its own set of rules. A good sequel is just the right amount of different and similar. It needs to do new things and fit with what's come before. In fact, the author Michael Crichton said this very thing about writing a sequel to Jurassic Park. Sorry, another Jurassic reference.
Because it has to be the same but different. Now, if it's really the same, then it's the same. And if it's really different, then it's not a sequel.
It's surprisingly tricky to do. Sometimes you get sequels like the Hobbit film trilogy that aggressively try to match what came before, even though the story doesn't suit it at all. So how does While Darkness Gathers goes at that? Well, I think it's pretty damn close to the Goldilocks middle ground of balance, just leaning slightly though towards different. The obvious differences are the shorter length, the light-hearted plot lines, and the sense of grand adventure. The big similarities are the beautiful, poetic writing style, the epic magics, and realistic battle scenes. I was surprised by how the story could be so different and still always feel just like Edan. That said, the biggest difference with the sequel is it doesn't have the huge military campaigns that dominated the first trilogy, so there's less strategy, huge clashes, and gritty action. But don't be too sad to miss out on that. I think in many ways this book showed all the signs of Philip's increased skill as a writer. Now, I want to be clear that I have the highest respect for Philip and the strongest admiration for the Edan trilogy, but I still had 3 critiques of the original trilogy, which I mentioned in my past video. And just to recap, those were: I thought characters could have been stronger, the pacing was slow in places, and the magic was sometimes vague. Even so, these were all slight critiques. You know, they weren't serious flaws. These areas were 4 out of 5 stars, where all the other areas were 5 stars. However, I was amazed to read the sequel and realized that all of these areas saw significant improvement. Deliberate, specific effort was made to strengthen these areas, and I love to see it. Philip is improving his craft.
I am your master now.
So for one, the characters in this book had arcs, internal battles, and stronger voices, making them more distinct and easier to empathize with. Though I should acknowledge, in the first trilogy, they were all in life and death situations constantly, so they didn't have as much time to slow down for introspection, but I still think the character writing in this book was stronger. As for the books being slow in places, well, obviously the shorter sequel was going to naturally improve things here, but it's not just about the length of the story, it's about controlling the pacing. You see, the plot needs to advance at a rate that suits this particular story, and I think here Philip had more mastery of it. It felt right. Finally, I thought the magic system was stronger too. Now, even though it's the exact same magic system and it hasn't somehow changed from soft to hard magic system, it felt more consistent. We, the reader, had a clearer idea of what it could do. It was never just enough or just not enough for the situation. Not to mention, the cost of the magic was never clearer in the reader's mind than in this book. Whereas the magic in the first trilogy had a vague cost and risk to it, here it's stark, in your face, and giving magic a greater sense of tension in the story. So overall, I was very happy with how this book adds to the story and the world of Edan, but also adds some serious talent and skill to Philip's repertoire. I've complimented the Edan trilogy before on its brilliant representation, and this book is no exception. Women are constantly present and active in this story. In fact, out of our 4 protagonists, 3 of them are women. And they're not damsels in distress either, which is saying something, because Sigra is literally a captive, and she's still an active character. These women have personalities and make decisions that shape the story. They are leaders, magicians, and strategists, not just things to be rescued. There are plenty of people of color in this story, but it also goes a lot deeper than that. Philip showcases his medievalist background and writes depictions of race that are straight out of history. Countries and peoples have long, complex histories of building tension between them, and old rivalries and minor offenses can one day explode into open conflict. We also see how easy it is to look at conflict in terms of good versus evil, when in reality it can often be more about which group of people we like more. And I don't want to get into spoilers, but this conflict is not as black and white as it seems, and evil races actually have their own culture and their own needs, which are quite valid. So it's a nuanced take that shows both maturity and hope that prejudice can be overcome. The last trilogy had a decent content warning, but the sequel tones things down a fair bit. There's still bloody violence and gore, such as, dragonfire melting off faces, but we don't have all the widespread war crimes and atrocities of the last series. Most of the dark content actually comes from that captivity plotline, with the threat of prisoner abuse and threat of sexual assaults. And the fight with the dragon itself can be pretty violent, but otherwise this is just not as dark of a book. Before we wrap things up, we should address the reading order. Now, I've seen Philip himself suggest that you can go straight to this book if you're okay with spoilers for the trilogy, and I think functionally that will work, but I don't want to disagree with the author himself. I just think that there are so many spoilers if you go straight to this one. In some ways, it's almost a shame that this shorter, easier to read book with such a high concentration of quality writing probably shouldn't be read first. It would be such a great introduction to Edan, and it showcases the best of Philip's writing. So ultimately, I leave it up to you. Good luck and happy reading. I hope you'll check out the Edan trilogy and its sequel, or at the very least, go check out Philip's channel and show him a bit of love. If you want to support what I do, I have my own books, The Immortal Investigations. I also have a shop and a Patreon. Any of those will help me out. You can also like, comment, and subscribe for free and do all that stuff that will boost the video. Otherwise, I will see you again very soon. I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye!